Hey everybody, welcome into another video. By far the most often asked question I get from all of you is how do I work on vocabulary? And how should I work on vocabulary in my practice time? And the answer is a lot of different ways, but I wanted to kind of start something on the channel where I actually go through my process in some of those different ways. And today we're going to talk about my absolute favorite way to work on vocabulary. And we're going to actually go through the process together and I'll show you what it looks like. So, I am taking a piece of vocabulary today from one of the most legendary jazz musicians, if not the most legendary jazz musician who ever lived, Louis Armstrong. And this is from his solo on Struttin' with Some Barbecue. And if you don't know Louis Armstrong and the Hot Fives and the Hot Sevens, this is from 1927, and it absolutely changed the face of jazz. So even if you're like an ultra modern player or aspired to be, you have to go and check out this recording. Now, this solo is spectacular. It is just unbelievable. I suggest you go and check out the whole thing. But we're going to be dealing with one particular part of it, and it's actually the way that he starts his solo. So here's the piece of vocabulary that we're going to start with. That's it. So you're probably thinking to yourself, you chose the most simple piece of vocabulary in the entire solo. Yes, I did. And this is what I absolutely love to do. I like to take something that is so simple. I don't even have to explain what's going on here. It's so simple, but you're going to see the power of using something super simple, super small, and how that's actually going to allow us so much freedom when we go and we try to make this piece of vocabulary our own. All right, so this tune is in A flat concert, but we're going to use it over a B flat concert blues. Just because I think that's a really nice form, easy to understand. For most of us, it's very familiar. So here's sort of the first thing that I will do with the piece of vocabulary. All right, so let's look at the first thing that I would do with this piece of vocabulary over the B flat blues. So the first thing that I would do is I would just make sure that I could kind of approximately play the piece of vocabulary over every part of the chord progression. So I'm not getting too adventurous with it. And, I might actually write this down. So the fact that it's written down, I may actually do that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not just for demonstration purposes. I think there's actually a lot of value in sitting down and writing something out, at least to start. At some point, you do have to move beyond that, but no problem in writing it out. So you can see I'm basically just doing it everywhere. Right? I'm trying to fit it over every chord. I'm largely keeping it exactly like it was in the original statement. Here I go off a little bit, but then I come right back. Same. Here I morph it a little bit depending on how it sounds over the chord. What I think is that it sort of sounds better, changing it a little bit over a minor 7 chord, and then I go right back to it. All right. So that's my first step, is to just kind of test myself to see if I could put the raw short piece of vocabulary over the entire chord progression, because all of my freedom that's going to come after this is going to sort of be based on my ability to just play the piece of vocabulary. Okay, so now that I've got my basic one out of the way, now I want to start to see what I can do in terms of being a little flexible with this piece of vocabulary, developing it, taking it somewhere. So I'm not going to be as strict with myself on making sure that I keep it exactly like the original. So you can see I do start with the piece of vocabulary exactly like it's played by Louis. But then what I start to realize is that, oh, you know what? I can actually just play it with the same notes over this second chord, and it sounds actually really good, better than changing the notes. Then I simply come back to it, and then all of a sudden, I'm starting to develop what I'm doing with this piece of vocabulary, and you'll hear that when I play it. So a little bit of development, I allow myself a little bit of more leash when I'm hitting this part of it. Okay, then I come back to it, the original idea, stay with the original idea because I realize it also works over this chord. I'm changing the rhythm slightly, and then I come back to it. So you see, I'm not going very far, but I'm taking a little bit of creative license. Now, here's where I really start to change things, right? Now I'm thinking about, okay, how can I take the original idea and fit it to this different chord? Oh, cool. Well, I realized that I could change the top note and the bottom note to fit this chord, 3 to flat 9. Awesome. All right, now I'm moving on to the 2-5 here. Now I'm changing the interval again. I slightly changed the rhythm, but we already saw that. Ooh, then I'm changing the notes again, and then I'm ending it with a phrase that I just think sounds cool. But here's the thing. As you listen to this, see if you can hear the thread of the original idea. Even though I'm changing things, you could still have that original ideas kind of floating around in your ears because I'm not going very far from it. In fact, I'm coming back to it a whole bunch. All right, so now I'd move another level, right? Now I want to try to go a little bit further, but always come back to the piece of vocabulary. Now I might try to think about the shape a little bit more, right? So not necessarily paying attention to like functionally what it does. So, it goes 5, 6, 1, 6, 1, 6. I want to pay attention to this shape a little bit more, sort of how it looks on paper, how it comes across, the direction that it's going, up, down, the distance between the intervals. These are all pretty close intervals, so I might start messing with that a little bit. So I'm still starting with the idea, and I'm flipping it into the next chord, and now I go off a little bit. And I'm trying to think of something that I could play here that leaves the idea a little bit, but still complements it the way that it originally was played. Now I'm checking back in with the idea right here, rhythmically, and then I'm kind of going off again a little bit. Now I have the idea note-wise, but in a completely different rhythm. And then I'm going off a little bit. Do you see how this works? Like I'm sort of doing my own little call and response with the idea and other ideas. And now it's inspiring some other stuff that's a little more harmonically interesting at the end of the form for this one. So again, what you'll hear when I play this is that I'm getting a little bit further away from it, but I think you can still hear that the original idea is always in my head. It's always the theme behind wherever I'm going with this. All right, let's look at one final written example. And in this one, I'm starting to get a little more freaky with it, right? I'm starting to really move away from it at points, but then trying to always kind of keep it in my mind, but go further and further and further from it. So you see, I start with the idea rhythmically and shape-wise, but now it's in a completely different part of the chord harmonically and melodically, right? But it's still very reminiscent of that original idea. In fact, it has the exact same rhythm as the original idea. And then I'm kind of going further away from it, further away from it. I come back to the notes of the idea, with a different rhythm, and then I'm trying to figure out where I can logically and melodically go after playing the idea again. And then here, I realize that, oh, this sounds kind of cool with these wide intervals, these wide tritone intervals. So I stay with that. I allow myself even more leash to go, okay, you don't have to come back to the idea. You can keep going with your own idea a little bit more. Now I come back to the rhythm of the idea, but the notes are completely different. Even the shape of the notes is completely different. And then here, I'm basically coming back to the original idea and then going back on my own. So this one comes back to the idea much, much less than all the other ones, right? And that's kind of the progression that I'm going for here, is to give myself more freedom, more freedom, more freedom. But do you notice that the idea was still sort of the inspiration for this entire chorus of material? And I still nodded a little bit to the idea in several places. But I think you'll agree that we've gone on quite a journey now, right? Coming from that original bo-ba-dee-ba-dee-dot, right? We've gone a long way, and that's kind of the whole point, is I'm using my own creativity to flip that. Now, the final step in the process is I would probably put on a backing track and I would just try to play something on the spot, always sort of using that idea as grounding. So maybe whenever my phrase ends, I try to bring it back to something that has some element of that original idea by Lewis. And you see how all this work I did writing stuff down on paper and really thinking about it and playing all these choruses could naturally lead me to a little bit more skills when I kind of just say to myself, okay, here's the backing track, go. And that's the whole point here. We don't want to ignore pencil and paper. We don't want to only use pencil and paper. We kind of want to be doing a healthy dose of everything. So let's finish this off by me playing a couple of choruses just off the top of my head, trying to incorporate that original piece of vocabulary in it at places. And to be honest with you, as I'm saying this, I haven't recorded it yet, so I have no idea how it's going to go. We'll see together. All right, so what I want you to do at the action piece is to find your own simple little piece of vocabulary. The simpler, the better, because what it does is it allows us to flip it into something almost unrecognizable. And I find that the more specialized and specific the piece of vocabulary is, the less we can do that. So remember, consider the notes, consider the rhythm, consider everything about that little piece of vocabulary. And what's cool about this process is you're not only taking inspiration from the masters, which we know is so important. We want to emulate those masterful musicians. That's such a part of the tradition. But it also exercises your creativity. It exercises your creative brain because if you start with something that's super simple and basic, you have to be creative with it to come up with a way to keep it interesting through all these different iterations. So I want you to go and find something super simple and just start this process, right? Start by composing something on paper, slow down that thinking, and then eventually, hopefully, you can get to that point where you're kind of doing things on the spot, doing things in the moment, and manipulating this original piece of vocabulary in your own way on the spot, which is obviously what improvisation is all about. So let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you do this in your own time or if this is something you would like to start doing. And also let me know if you have any questions about this process. I'd be happy to answer those. All right, everybody. Hope you're doing well, and we'll see you soon.